This takes place in early 2019. My good friend Jesse has always been an avid fisherman from a young age when his dad taught him. His dad is even more of a fishing fanatic than Jesse is. For as long as I've known them, they've been pestering me to accompany them on one of their weekend fishing trips on their yacht out to the Atlantic. I had always avoided it for the longest time, not just because I never really enjoyed fishing, but also because I was just too busy with work. Well, I finally gave in during March of 2019. I was finally heading up to Jesse's house out by the bay to go on one of their weekend yacht fishing trips. I had packed everything I would need for the weekend into a small suitcase and loaded it into Jesse's truck. Then we all drove down to the nearby dock and brought our luggage onto Jesse's large, luxurious boat. After that, we were off into the ocean horizon. Unsurprisingly, my personal fishing went completely uneventful. If it wasn't for the beautiful view of the surrounding waves and the fact I could lie on the lounge chair and work on my tan while my line was cast, I probably would have given up in less than half an hour. But I managed to last about an hour and 20 minutes of continuously casting and then reeling in over the side of the boat without success. Meanwhile, between Jesse and his dad, they had caught a mutton snapper and a mackerel. As the sun began to dip into the horizon, the sky turned a mesmerizing deep orange. I snapped a few photos and then heard Jesse calling me from the stern. I walked back there and he and his dad were firing up the grill on the back of the boat, about to cook the fish they'd caught. He asked me to grab some beers from the fridge in the upstairs cabin, and I obliged. As the sun went down and the sky went from orange to black and starry, Jesse, his dad, and I all dug into the fish and shared a few drinks and stories. We were having a blast, and I was finally beginning to enjoy myself a bit. It was an amazing, surreal feeling, enjoying a nice fish dinner on the rear of a boat, encompassed by a sky full of stars and dark waves. At some point, we started hearing noises from beyond the port side. It was like splashing in the water. We all exchanged glances, and then Jesse got up. Sounds like a big catch. Let's go see. We all walked over to the railing and peeked over the edge. I scanned the black, foamy waves. At first I couldn't see anything, but as I heard a frightened gasp escape from Jesse and his dad, I noticed it. Gently bobbing in the waves just a few feet from the boat was a dark, round object. I squinted. Little by little, I began to make out more and more. A nose, a mouth, 2 eyes. I slowly backed up from the railing, feeling as if this couldn't be real. I heard Jesse talking faintly, but I was watching the sky around me. The darkness seemed to be growing thicker, and the shadows were closing in on me. Jesse shouting my name loudly snapped me back to reality. He walked over and told me that whatever it was had vanished below the surface. My apprehension subsided as he said this. We spent a few minutes talking about what we thought it could have been. We decided it could have been a log or something. It was truly too dark to honestly declare with certainty what we had seen was a face. So after that and a few more drinks, we headed off to bed. Jesse's dad was sleeping in his own cabin, and me and Jesse were sharing a cabin. I was sleeping on the couch. During the night, I awoke to someone walking across the deck. The floors on the ship were really creaky. I assumed it was Jesse's dad going to the bathroom or something, because I could see Jesse was still in bed. The footsteps went around our cabin and suddenly stopped when they were right next to the window above the couch. I sat there on my side facing Jesse's bed opposite the window. I never heard footsteps walk away. Eventually I gave in to curiosity. I sat up and looked out the window and screamed. There was a man, not Jesse's dad, but rather a skinny black guy in his 20s wearing a black hood with his face pressed up against the glass, and his hands cupped around his eyes as if to better see inside. I screamed and screamed as Jesse began scrambling out of bed. We both watched in horror as the man very calmly lowered his hands, turned, and walked away from the window. Seconds later, we heard the door being tried, but thank God it was locked for whatever reason. Then silence. We couldn't do anything other than scream for Jesse's dad repeatedly. We were too afraid to leave the cabin without protection, but Jesse told me there should be a Glock in his dad's cabin. Eventually, Jesse's dad came knocking on the door. We opened up and told him what happened. He said he hadn't seen anyone on deck and it didn't look like anyone was on the boat anywhere, but we followed him as he ran up to his cabin to grab the Glock. After that, we did a thorough search of the yacht and the surrounding waters, which yielded no result. We checked all possible hiding spots on the boat too. Nothing. Well, except for one thing. During our search, Jesse called me over to the side of the boat. Floating down there in the dark water below was that log again. The one that looked way too similar to a face. After that, Jesse's dad turned on the propeller and started driving us the hell out of there. Within an hour, we were back to shore. I ended up crashing at Jesse's place that night. We never figured out who that guy was, how he got on the boat, or what he wanted. And if that was really a person's face we saw in the water. The whole thing just utterly freaks me out and hurts my brain to think about today. Jesse and I are still good friends, and we've told this story quite a few times. Most people's reactions are to laugh or call our bluff. But I know that memory of seeing that man standing outside that window is going to stay with me forever. I worked on a car carrier in the Middle East around 3 years ago that typically ran through the Red Sea and/or the Arabian Sea. Our routes would occasionally pass through waters known to be inhabited by pirates, but there were always a few dozen or so armed Marines posted throughout the ship at all times in case there was a problem. Despite frequently passing through these dangerous waters, as far as I know, we never had any dangerous encounters, apart from this one night I was working the stern. The time was somewhere around 2:30 in the morning. The ocean was pitch black out. It also happened to be a night that a couple of the Marines had not been present on the ship. I had only seen 4 of them patrolling the entire time I had been working, when normally I would see all 12 or so of them present. Anyways, we were passing through pirate waters off of Yemen when I heard over the radio that there were some issues with one of the primary engines. The cockpit was instructed to shut off all engines and drift the ship until the issue was solved, and all maintenance crew were instructed to report to the engine room. All other staff, including me, were instructed to patrol around the ship. The lights from the ship were too dim to see out into the black water before me, so I turned on my spotlight and aimed it straight ahead. The light instantly revealed at least 4 or so rusted motorboats in the water 15 feet from the forepeak. There were 3 men sitting in each boat, all guys wearing tattered jackets or white undershirts, just staring blankly at me. At least 6 of them were armed with heavy-duty looking automatic rifles, all pointed at me. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing was real. My heart was practically in my throat and I couldn't move a muscle out of pure fear. I just continued to stare back at them as they all stared back at me with their cold, emotionless expressions. I knew if I tried to reach for the radio to call security, I would probably be shot. So I just continued to stare at them in shock. In reality, it had to have only been 2 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I can say with certainty that's the only time in my whole life I genuinely ever felt scared for my life. Then, by some kind of miracle, one of the men in camo jeans and a dirty undershirt turned around and waved his hands and said something to all the other boats. Simultaneously, they all began to start their motors and ride off slowly into the black night, all not breaking eye contact with me as they left. Then they were gone just as quickly as they had appeared, leaving nothing behind but foamy currents disrupting the calm waters. I continued to stay rooted to the spot until the water settled and all was calm again. Then I reached for the radio and called security. Thankfully, the engine had gotten started up quickly afterwards, and security was patrolling all around the boat. As far as I know, they never found anyone, and we completed the rest of the trip without issue. To this day, the memory of all those cold, expressionless faces staring at me from the water is one I still picture when I close my eyes to go to sleep at night. So this happened fairly recently. Me and a few other guys and gals were out working for a privately owned research, education, and diving equipment company. We had departed from Annapolis early that morning for a day's work in the Chesapeake Bay. The work would entail catching sharks and stingrays on our line for a population survey of those two specific animals. Basically, when we felt a significant number had been caught in our net, we'd lift them out of the water, tag each of them, and then release them back into the water. So we had departed from the docks on the project coordinator's boat at around 7:30 that morning, with around 5 other men and women, excluding myself and the project coordinator. It had been a fairly uneventful first hour out on the water, with only about 20 sharks and stingrays having been tagged. It had been over 20 minutes since the last catch at the time when things began first taking an odd turn. A few tugs on the net had been felt, so the project coordinator operating the controls began trying to raise the net. But for one reason or another, the net wouldn't budge. The coordinator told us that it was common for the net to get caught on larger animals or debris in the water. But after a few more tries and even moving the boat a few feet from the original area, the net would still not budge, leaving everyone scratching their heads. At this point, the coordinator could say with certainty that this was no technical issue. I was already suited with diving gear because a few minutes earlier I had been asked to dive into the water to grab a stray shark that had escaped from the net, so I volunteered to dive in and see what the net was caught on. Once I was given the okay to do so, I dived in. The bubbles around me faded, and I was faced with a vast, eerie, deep green nothingness and a net before me. But I quickly discovered no kind of animal or debris was caught in the net. I swam around its perimeter multiple times, but could not locate any source of the trouble we had been having. It was right when I was getting ready to swim to the surface and report my findings, which was nada. I noticed movement from within the green abyss out of the corner of my eye. I turned to face that direction. At first I wasn't sure what I was seeing. There was some kind of movement within the green abyss. My first thought was that it was a fin whale, but it seemed to have arms. The closer it got, I realized I was seeing some kind of grotesque whale humanoid-looking creature. It had visible rows of needle-like teeth, and scariest of all, just empty sockets where eyes should have been, and it was swimming right towards me. I could feel my heart stop as I kicked towards the surface like there was no tomorrow. As soon as I emerged, I practically leapt onto the boat, to the surprise of my peers. Instantly, I yelled that there was something down there. As I crept towards the edge of the boat to peer over, I could see nothing but the deep green waves.